Ready.
Well, welcome everyone to Forum 2100 and the inaugural talk on business and energy. This is David Gauci speaking from Lausanne, Switzerland, and on behalf of Dave Nagel and me, we are thrilled to have you join us in this first talk of the series that will continue at least for the year. And we are very grateful to have two special presenters today, Tito Jankowski and Matthew Eshed, co-founders of Impossible Labs in San Francisco, California. They are also going to talk about their new venture, Air Miners. Tito is a biomedical engineer and Matthew is a mechanical engineer. But both have had very interesting backgrounds, and I encourage you to go look at their website, Impossible Labs, to get a little bit more information about their backgrounds. So welcome to Tito and Matthew. And here's what we're going to be doing today in terms of our format. We're going to be turning the hosting over to Tito and Matthew to talk for about 18 minutes, actually no more than 18 minutes. After that, we'll take questions, and Tito and Matthew can engage in questions and answers with us. And right before the close of the session, I will give you some information on how to get the recording of this session if you want to go back and review it or send it on to friends. Also some information on our next talk. And we, of course, will be interested in feedback from you. So without further ado, I am now going to pass this over to Tito, who is going to give us a rundown on Air Miners.
Air Miners. We were curious about climate change, and so we asked everybody around us in Silicon Valley what they were working on. We talked to engineers, we talked to designers, we talked to entrepreneurs. We found people working on really incredible stuff and having a blast. We found a buffet of different options. There were people working on completely new ideas in food, air, energy, and water. And it was so much that we knew we had to find our place. What we learned was that carbon dioxide is the bottleneck. It's very well known that that is the root cause of the changing climate. Is carbon dioxide levels are going up. Today they're around 407 parts per million of carbon dioxide, and they're continuing to rise every day and every year. What we also found out is that there's an incredible amount of work that's already been done. Global emissions over the past few years have stopped growing. And that's because of a lot of work in renewable energy. For example, the cost of solar has fallen so that solar is cheaper than ever and continues to be cheaper every day. Wind energy has gotten to be such an interesting business opportunity that Warren Buffett himself has invested in a $4 billion wind farm. And so we see that there's all these opportunities in energy and business and returning to zero emissions. So taking carbon dioxide out of emissions and out of manufacturing and out of production. What we learned is there's an opportunity to go beyond zero emissions. It's called negative emissions. It's called for by V. Ramanathan, senior scientist at Scripps Institute of Oceanography, also involved in the original discovery of the ozone hole, the hole in the ozone layer. And what he's talking about, alongside with an article in the New Yorker recently and an article in Wired in December, is let's remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. How do we go beyond the smokestack, beyond removing what we're putting out, and go back to that 407 parts per million and start to lower that back to 406, back to 400, back to 350, back to 300. So I wanted to share what we found. We found that this is a incredibly active industry. We found over 60 companies doing incredible stuff in capturing carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and they're turning it into products. They're turning it into plastics and concrete and fuels, or they're storing it. And that's very interesting because that's why we started Impossible Labs. We said climate change is a business opportunity. And we went out with that perspective and that view. And this is what we found. And so we created air miners as a way to share that with the world and to share that with the people who are working in capturing carbon and storing it and productizing it, so that they can see what else is going on, so they can find opportunities, and they can connect with investors or corporations who want to buy their devices. So I'd like to show you air miners and walk you through some of these really cool companies that we found. So this is the website Air Miners. As I said, there's companies in negative emissions are working on capture and sequestration or storage and products. And I'd like to show you a company in capture called Climeworks. And they've recently been profiled in the news a bunch. And they're working on, you'll get it when you see it. It's a giant array of fans, basically, that pulls carbon dioxide. It pulls air from the atmosphere through and extracts the carbon dioxide. And again, they're doing this with the mentality that captured carbon is a free material. It is something that we can turn into products. This is different than carbon dioxide being a bad thing and carbon dioxide being something we just need to get rid of. They're saying, how can we capture this carbon dioxide? It's free. What can we turn it into? So it's very exciting. They're a spin-out startup based in Switzerland. They have a growing team. They've raised money, and they've started on a partnership with Audi, for example, to work on Audi's emissions and create offsets. And they've also started a partnership with a company I'll talk a little bit about later called CarbFix that's working on storing carbon dioxide under the ground. So if you go back to air miners, there's many companies that are working in this area in terms of capturing carbon dioxide and trying to figure out, what do we do with it that's valuable? One other one I wanted to show you that's changing the game a bit is called open nanocarbon. And what they're looking at is just a massive scale carbon dioxide removal. I mean, they're talking about solidifying carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and in a number of decades, removing enough carbon to return to 350 or 300 parts per million carbon dioxide. What's significant, in addition to the scale, is that it's open source. The thesis for open nanocarbon is this idea that we need a level playing field of intellectual property, a level playing field of understanding that this is an issue, a level playing field that this is valuable, free material that we can pull out and turn into something more useful, whether that's carbon, new materials, or new fuels. And so that's the capture. Again, it's coming from this perspective that if we capture carbon dioxide, we can do something useful with it. So I want to show you sequestration as well. So this is moving into, now we've got the carbon dioxide. What do we do with it? I had mentioned CarbFix earlier. They're based in Iceland, and they are a collaborative research installation, removing carbon dioxide from a geothermal plant and injecting it underground into basalt rocks, so the carbon dioxide is stored there permanently. I think this is a good example because it shares kind of the storage mentality of carbon dioxide. Let's capture carbon dioxide and then store it away. To make it even more of a business opportunity is a company called Biocarbon Engineering. Biocarbon Engineering is they've designed a drone system that can plant trees to remove carbon dioxide. They can plant trees at 1/100th of the current cost. Their business model right now is focused on environmental remediation for mining sites. And so they're pulling carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere, in a big way, because mining operations need to reforest an area, and they have to pay a lot to do it. To reforest an area that's been torn up, that's unsafe for somebody to walk through and plant trees. Biocarbon engineering comes in, they say, no problem, we've got a drone that can drop these seed pods and plant trees for a fraction of the cost, 2 orders of magnitude less. And that's something that caught our attention, because that's again, this new idea that removing carbon dioxide can be something that we do as an opportunity. And then there's products. More products like concrete, new materials. I mean, there's many different companies that you can look at on air miners. One I wanted to start off with is called Mango Materials, and they're based in San Francisco, somewhere nearby. And what they're working on, they've got a great diagram that really makes the point. It's that carbon dioxide is this free material. It's this opportunity. They're specifically talking about methane gas in this diagram. But what they're turning it into is biopolymers. So they're turning it into plastics. And that's exciting, because again, it's this idea that excess carbon dioxide is an opportunity, a business opportunity. One more example is called Carbon Cure. They've just launched 25 new concrete plants in partnership with Thomas, a large building materials company. And so what they're saying is, let's remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, let's capture it, and let's turn it into concrete. Maybe someday they can make concrete that's even less expensive than concrete that's mined, freshly mined. And one that changes the game a bit more is called Nori. This is a company that just launched last month, a few weeks ago. And they're really at the front of the curve, because what they're integrating blockchain technology to create a carbon removal market. What's powerful about this is the scale. They're not waiting around for somebody else to create a market. They're going out and saying, we need carbon removal. We have the tools, we have the software. Blockchain is open source. Anybody can download it and create their own blockchain. Nori is creating a blockchain for tracking carbon removal and to create an exchange in a market that's global. And so at all levels, we see that there's very new thinking going on around carbon dioxide, and that carbon dioxide is this opportunity for entrepreneurs and scientists. And so on Air Miners, we've profiled those companies that are springing up as startups and projects that are happening at universities around the world. You can check out the website. It's airminers.org, and it has profiles of about 60 companies today. We're adding more as they get added every week. If you click on Add Profile, then you can scout companies for us. If there's ones that you want to share that you've seen, you can join the site and add a company.
Well, Tito, thank you very much.
Certainly.
This is quite interesting. We have a few questions for you that are bubbling up from the audience. The first one, considering that the theme of this whole series is innovation in business and energy, we're quite interested in trying to, as you were articulating at the very beginning, trying to see what role business can play in making a difference with respect to issues relating to energy generally, and certainly the climate issues as you've addressed them. But a big question here is, from a business point of view, how does all of this or any of this work if we're somewhat unclear about setting a price for carbon?
That's a great question. I think my partner Matthew Eshed will have a good answer for that one.
Hello. Yeah, that's a great question. I think, and certainly one that comes up very often. We're using the language that we're using has been used since the 90s and since really going back into the mid 20th century when greenhouse gas emissions were first identified as a real problem. So how can we do any of this without a set price on carbon dioxide? So the way I see it is within that there's an assumption that there needs to be a top-down determination of how much a ton of carbon dioxide is worth. And certainly that's a conversation that's happening, and there is some development that's happening in that space. There's an alternative to it, which is the one that we utilize, that we think about, which is that there is already a market for carbon dioxide and a price for carbon dioxide, and it's set by the market. You can think about carbonation for beverages. That comes from the production of ethylene. It's a byproduct, and it's about $15 a ton. So the change in thinking is that CO2 from the atmosphere becomes a way to get CO2 and put it into that market. It's not about cap and trade. It's about simply that it's valuable material that's widely available, and the company, the endeavor that can extract it from the atmosphere for the lowest cost will be able to introduce it into the market.
Well, I think it's very interesting the typology that you have. You've broken this into three pieces: capture, sequestration, and products. So I can certainly see it from the point of view of products, but if you are simply thinking about capture or even sequestration, how assured can we be that there actually is going to be a prevailing price for carbon, or carbon dioxide even, under each of those three applications?
What do you mean when you say a prevailing price? Can you explain a little bit?
A uniform price, let's say. Are all the markets, is there going to be differentiation with respect to the pricing of carbon or carbon dioxide?
Certainly. I think as with the current market for CO2, there's food grade carbon dioxide, there's carbon dioxide that's used in the production of chemicals, there's carbon, and then there is that difference based on the need of the end user, or of the customer rather. So in terms of the product and all of the many products that can be produced with carbon dioxide as a raw material, we're looking at clothing, food and feedstock, fuels. Each one of those will have its own required mix or its own chemical identity that it needs, and then it's up to the capture companies and the whole value chain that exists in between the capture and the end use that will determine what the price is.
Well, you gave a very good example, I think, and I'm trying to remember which one it was. I think it's biocarbon engineering, which was sequestration for mining, the planting of trees, and doing it very efficiently and economically. And so I guess a question would be, from a business point of view, as to whether or not, in order to make a business model viable in this whole area of carbon capture, carbon sequestration, carbon productizing, you really have to be quite conscious of the context in which you're actually sort of making the application.
You're totally right. Whether it's within sequestration, whether it's a carb fix project where you have the Reykjavik Energy collaborating with Columbia University, collaborating with Climeworks, the technology provider, in order to apply the research at Columbia, where they found that it takes 2 years for carbon dioxide to turn into a solid carbonate. That's its own model, and each one of those stakeholders has they have their own reason for being there. Biocarbon engineering is another example. Then when we get into products, there's new business models that will be created. And last semester, I worked with a team at the University of Maryland to go from of undergraduates. Whoa, hold on a second. Sorry. Okay. To go from knowing nothing about carbon markets to creating a business model for a business that uses atmospheric carbon dioxide to create fuels. And what we identified is that business needs to say, we make fuels from atmospheric carbon dioxide, and that's how we market our product.
Okay. Two other quick questions here. One a little bit far out, but we do know, and as Tito sort of led us into this, I think we do understand that there's compelling evidence that the climate issues and CO2 in the atmosphere in high concentrations has been associated with human activity, particularly since the Industrial Revolution. If we unleash all this entrepreneurial activity in carbon capture, carbon sequestration, and carbon productizing, is it possible that we could actually go too far and create the other problem, that we extract too much carbon out of the atmosphere? In other words, what are we going to do if there are some unintended consequences?
That's a wonderful question. Tito, can I take it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So yeah, I think it's an unavoidable question, and there is a debate about what the ideal steady state is, and is there even a steady state? The way I see it is that we're working to restore balance. We're working to restore respiration of Earth itself. We have exhaled carbon dioxide into the atmosphere through industry, through the burning of fossil fuels. We've simultaneously degraded the land so that now the Earth we've degraded its ability to naturally sequester, to inhale. And so we think about planting seeds. Through planting as many seeds as we can plant, seeds of thought, we will then introduce this restored balance of how industry and how human activity can continue in a way that's prosperous for people and also healthy for the planet.
Okay, thank you. Now to air miners, just for a moment. Can you tell us a little bit where you guys see yourselves fitting in the value chain? What's your business model? How are you going to sustain yourselves? Are you a nonprofit?
Yeah, Impossible Labs and Air Miners, we created as a for-profit company. We had thought about nonprofit or for-profit. We had talked to different advisors, and people who even pulled off hybrids. And ultimately, climate change is a business opportunity, and Impossible Labs, therefore, is formed as a for-profit company. Our focus with Air Miners is to go after creating, helping to make the market for this. Right now, we see the start of specialization. I think 5 years ago or so, a lot of the companies that we saw were, they were trying to do everything. They were trying to do full stack. When the pieces didn't exist, we don't yet have the Intel of carbon removal. We don't yet have the Samsung of carbon removal. We don't yet have the Microsoft of carbon removal. But we have, for a while, companies were trying to be the Apple. It's really hard to be Apple when you don't have an Intel, a Samsung, to provide components and modules. So we see our role as helping to engineer and pilot these technologies in partnership with corporations, in partnership with cities, multinationals like the World Bank. That is our role, is to modularize and create the market by helping to push along the Intel, helping to push along the Samsung, helping to push along the Microsoft. And help develop those companies. We've raised a seed round to pursue this, and we've been working on this for the past year and a half. We're specifically interested in connecting to other Fortune 500 companies that are interested in carbon removal. And really, if there's somebody in the audience who has experience in the R&D arm, and we'd love to get their perspective and advice on how we can make this work. It's never been done before. A lot of people say it's impossible, and we are Impossible Labs.
Okay, well, Tito and And Matthew, thank you very much. You've been speaking to an audience at this meeting that spans quite a bit of geography from, let's see, Sao Paulo, Brazil, all the way up to Alaska, and then following over to through the United States, all across the United States, up and down the West Coast, across the Midlands, the central part of the US, Washington, D.C., the Northeast, and then in Europe, you have people from Berlin, Switzerland. You've got people watching you from Rabat, Morocco, and from Cairo, Egypt, Ankara, Turkey. It's been quite a group. So I'm glad that we've been able to feature you today, and you've been able to tell us your story. And I hope your phone starts ringing off the hook, if people actually answer phones these days. But we'll pass the information around, and we will be meeting again. I just want to forewarn everyone that I think Tito and Matthew have set a good sort of example of how we want to proceed. Our next meeting is going to be 21st of March, 2018, and same time. It'll be 11:30, and it will not be Eastern Standard Time. It'll actually be Eastern Daylight Time. The speaker will be François Ville, who is the Executive Director of the Energy Center at EPFL. And his topic is going to be looking at a venture that he is the non-executive chairman of that will be launching this year commercially, called Softcar, and it is a new concept for electric vehicles. So please be looking for emails that will be going out to the distribution list for all the audience and for any of your friends. This will give you information as to how to reach the recorded session if you would like to review it. And please do send back to either Dave Nagel or me or both of us. We'll have our email addresses again in the email that we send out to you. If you have any feedback, suggestions, or ideas for future speakers. But thanks very much for attending. We're grateful for your attendance and look forward to seeing you or having you on the next time. All the best.
Thank you.
Okay, can you hear me? Well,
looks like we're still recording.
No, I think we stopped. Oh, Tito, you have to stop it.